Someone has said that addiction is a flight from distress. So dismissing addictions as bad habits or self-destructive behavior comfortably hides their functionality in the life of the addict. It's impossible to understand addiction without asking what relief the addict finds or hopes to find in the drug or the addictive behavior. Addiction always originates in pain, unresolved pain. Pastor Tim Keller writes, "You know how addiction works. It starts like this. There's some kind of disappointment or distress in your life. As a result, you choose to deal with that distress with an agent. It might be sex, it might be drugs, it might be alcohol. The agent promises transcendence. The agent promises freedom, a sense of being in control, a sense of being above all of this, a sense of being liberated, a sense of escape. And so you do it. But when you do it, when you take the addicting agent as a way of dealing with life, the trap is set." Well, one of the common, universal sources of ongoing pain is unresolved injustices, unforgiven hurts, wounds, betrayals, abandonments, abuse. Addict, what if there was a tool, accessible tool, that can help you begin to forgive more than you have already? And if so, your brain would need the drug or activity of choice less. Welcome to God's love for the unlovable, forgiving the unforgivable at last. Drugs, sex, addiction, pornography, alcohol, nicotine are far more than just a quest for pleasure. They are the addict's attempt to escape distress, to cover up the deeply entrenched and largely subconscious pain in their brain resulting from old, often childhood and even infancy, unresolved hurts and wounds and abuses, feelings of abandonment. From a medical point of view, addicts are self-medicating conditions like oppression, anxiety, PTSD, ADHD. Here's Gabor Mate again. Addictions always originate in pain, whether felt openly or hidden in the unconscious. They are emotional anesthetics. Heroin and cocaine, both powerful physical painkillers, also ease psychological discomforts. Infant animals separated from their mothers can be soothed readily by low doses of narcotics, just as if it was actual physical pain they were enduring. Did you know that pain, like when you step on a rock, is registered in the same part of the brain as when you feel emotional rejection and loneliness and isolation, or you're being ostracized? Mate concludes, when people speak of feeling hurt or of having emotional pain, they are not being abstract or poetic, but scientifically quite precise. Here's Mate. The hard drug addict's life has been marked by a surfeit of pain. No wonder she desperately craves relief. Quote, "In moments I go from complete misery and vulnerability to total invulnerability," says Judy, a 36-year-old heroin and cocaine addict who is now trying to kick her 2-decade habit. "I have lots of issues. A lot of reasons why I use is to get rid of those thoughts and emotions and cover them up." The question is never why the addiction, but why the pain. Mate continues. "Most hardcore substance abusers come from abusive homes. The majority of my Skid Row patients suffered severe neglect and maltreatment early in life. Almost all the addicted women inhabiting the downtown east side were sexually assaulted in childhood, as were many of the men. The autobiographical accounts and case files of Portland residents tell stories of pain upon pain, rape, beatings, humiliation, rejection, abandonment, relentless character assassination. As children, they were obliged to witness the violent relationships, self-harming life patterns, or suicidal addictions of their parents, and often had to take care of them. Or they had to look after younger siblings and defend them from being abused, even as they themselves endured the daily violation of their own bodies and souls. One man grew up in a hotel room where his prostitute mother hosted a nightly procession of men as her child slept, or tried to, on his cot on the floor. Robert Weiss concurs. When addicts face challenges and become emotionally needful, they automatically and without conscious thought turn to an addictive substance or behavior as a source of emotional distraction. Meanwhile, faced with identical stimuli, non-addicts typically seek support through emotional connection with compassionate and loving people. Thus, addicts are most often individuals who lack, fear, and avoid emotional intimacy, and who therefore seek comfort and soothing elsewhere, typically from sources that do not require emotional vulnerability. I cannot recall a single client who had not learned early in life, through abuse, neglect, and further traumas, that turning to other people for support, validation, and comfort would leave them feeling worse than before they had reached out. So these individuals learned to avoid the deep relational connections that, for healthier people, bring needed consolation, emotional resolution, and reward, instead finding it easier and emotionally safer to escape and dissociate through the abuse of addictive substances and behaviors. In short, addicts engage in their addictions as an adaptive distraction from their painfully unmet womb-to-tomb emotional dependency needs. Here's Matei. Not all addictions are rooted in abuse or trauma, but I do believe that they can all be traced to a painful experience. A hurt is at the center of all addictive behaviors. It is present in the gambler, the internet addict, the compulsive shopper, and the workaholic. The wound may not be as deep and the ache not as excruciating, and it may even be entirely hidden, but it's there. I told you early on that we try hard not to shame people here. Shaming at this point would sound like, so now that you know that you have issues with subconscious, unresolved pain and trauma, just stop it. Right? Just choose to let go. Just choose to forgive and move forward in your life. Well, here's the thing. I suspect that you've tried that over and over, and working harder at it again is, I think, only going to lead to another sense of failure and more shame and more stress, maybe even a relapse, using again in order to deal with the new pain of being a loser again. I mean, is that about right? I get it, and I'm not going to ask you to do anything that you can't do or that will trigger your brain's mechanisms anymore, more than they already are. In fact, I am going to work in concert with how your brain was designed by God. I want to tell you about a time-tested, sophisticated, powerful, online biblical tool that has helped over 1,000 people begin to forgive. So many of them were addicts. So many of them were stuck and discouraged. The Forgiving Path, www.forgivingpath.com, has helped so many addicts get some justice and healing for the pains and traumas in their brain that trigger relapses and drug use. We also understand that not all of you are able to go online and do the Forgiving Path, and that's okay. If you can, by the way, do that. But if you're in prison or a place where you can't access internet, there is also a forgiving workbook called Can't Forgive. Doesn't require the internet. Consider getting it at gospel-app.com. Either way, you're going to benefit from the material. Over 1,000 Christians have done what we are going to suggest, and the results are remarkable. Not perfect, that's heaven, but noticeable, encouraging, helpful movements forward. And it's not shaming, not triggering. As far as we can tell, here are some of the self-reported changes that have been experienced. In just 3 hours online, there's a 21% reduction on average in your desire to avoid or need to avoid or not even think about the person or institution that hurt you. A 20% reduction in desire for revenge in just 3 hours. A 38% increase of feeling of benevolence and empathy for the person who hurt you. And by the way, we'll never ask you to just choose to be empathetic. And this is the big one, 78% increase in your experience of justice for the crime or the abuse, the trauma committed against you. That's the linchpin of this whole thing. Now, those are amazing numbers, and you would have to agree, right, that if those shifts happen, that would be hopeful. The goal is that your midbrain would need self-medication less. That makes sense? So many of those who went through the Forgiving Path were addicts. Many were victims of chronic abuse, rape, attempted murder, unfortunate families of origin, orphans. I believe that the highest numbers of the percentage changes were reported by those who struggle with chronic addiction. And again, not perfect, that's relegated to heaven. We're looking for movement forward. Before we get to telling you more about how to get started with the forgiving path, I want to say a little bit about why your brain does struggle to forgive. You're not alone. You're not broken. It's how your brain is designed, and it's true for all of us, so no shame here. Here's the fact. Listen, your brain is just not designed to forgive. There, I said it. So many people have shared with me that they felt that their brain was working against them forgiving. That's right. Isn't that fascinating? I mean, as I say it, doesn't it make sense? So not only is forgiving really hard, it is, humanly speaking, impossible. It's brain science. We should forgive. We get that. Jesus said we must forgive, and yet we just can't seem to pull it off. Our prefrontal cortex, that portion of the rational brain where we choose to do things like choose to forgive, you might want to choose to forgive, but your midbrain says, and it's much more powerful, says, you've got to be kidding me. Let me explain. Think back to a crime against you, some abuse, neglect, exposure to violence, trauma, a hurt that you remember that seems to trigger self-medication some. You know, that part of your brain that heard about the hurt first was your midbrain, not your rational prefrontal cortex. Your midbrain's amygdala immediately realized the attack and initiated a crisis response, all in 1/27th of a second. So how fast is that? Snap your finger, and it's faster than even that. I picked up this analogy on the internet, but I love it. Think of the amygdala as your brain's TSA agent. So if you want to fly anywhere, you have to go through the TSA checkpoints. They are trained to look for anything threatening, metal objects, identification issues, red flags, etc. If they perceive no threat, you can go through to your gate and plane. But if they perceive a threat, they could shut down the entire airport, the brain. They initiate reactionary safety protocols, and nothing else will happen until that's resolved. All the focus is then on the perceived threat. So immediately your amygdala initiates a release of a chemical cocktail of 3 very fast-acting hormones. There's epinephrine, or adrenaline, which jumps up your heart rate. There's norepinephrine, which constricts your blood vessels, making more blood go to your arms in order for you to fight, or your legs so that you can run, right? And then perhaps the most powerful, cortisol, which shuts down your prefrontal cortex. So you're not thinking too much. You're not being reasonable. You may think you're being reasonable, but it's not true. And that ignites your fight, flight, or freeze reaction. It's subconscious. You can't stop it. So you might have hit back when that happened to you. You might have yelled in anger. You might have cried out in fear. You might have shut down and done nothing. And no judgment. Everyone's different. Every context is different. But your body is totally in reactionary mode. You didn't think about it. You didn't think it through. You reacted. That's how you're made. God made you to survive. Good thing if you're facing a mountain lion or a big old angry person who wants to hurt you every now and then, but your system is not meant to be chronic. The 3 powerful hormones stay in your system for 3 hours, typically, maybe up to 4 or 5, before you can truly be reasonable again. This is your sympathetic nervous system, or SNS. It directs your body's rapid and voluntary response to dangerous situations. Again, you can't control it, you can't stop it, you can't choose to be reasonable during that point in time. It's reactionary, not a good or a bad thing. It just is what it is. But your midbrain's not done. 2 things. First, the crisis creates an electrical neural pathway. Think of a walking path for electric signals in your brain. And if the crisis happens again, your brain doesn't need to create a new path. It already has one, and so the reaction is even quicker to the perceived threat. Then there is the midbrain's hippocampus. That's where your memories are stored, not just your memories of the hurt, but your emotions and your reactions related to the event. So when you were attacked, all of the complicated emotions and anger and rage and shock and shame and confusion and frustration, fear, all of them are stored with the memory in your hippocampus. Think of it like a file on your computer. That file is stored right there and is at easy access for your SNS to call for when it might be needed. So now, it has a history of what happened, a history of what it felt like to you, and a history of how you reacted. And when it is read by the SNS, it feels like it just happened again. If you're thinking about it now, it feels like the emotions are real, like it is present. That's why your addiction gets triggered so often by unresolved forgivenesses. So perceived threat, SNS lights up, DEFCON 4 retrieves history of similar event, and boom, a bigger and faster reaction before your thinking brain has even seen anything. Boom, your thinking brain gets shut down, overwhelmed by the 3 powerful chemicals. Then your brain responds to the familiar stress by demanding a drink or drugs or porn or sex or gambling. Make sense? Doesn't matter who you are, we've all been made this way. So make sense? It doesn't matter who you are, where you've come from, we're all made this way, male and female. So how does this apply to forgiving? All right, that's the right question. Well, let's say you've suffered chronic abuse by a caregiver or parent when you were a little child, or a bully, or an institution that you should have been protecting you. Or you suffered repeated injustices due to racism or sexism. That created a neural pathway that's getting bigger and faster and more powerful. It started off as a walking path and then became a sidewalk, then a 2-lane. Eventually, you've been beaten up enough, it became a superhighway. And electrical signal trucks were cruising through it at warp speed. Your brain did that because it wants to ignite the SNS as fast and as quick as possible to deal with this recurring threat. In fact, if it's used enough, it wraps the highway with a protective myelin sheath just to make sure that it stays there and is never erased. Think of it as a fat neural burrito with layer upon layer of myelin, a brain burrito. And it also gets more sensitive. If you perceive anything close to the threat, the SNS ignites and lights up the brain burrito. So let's say you're walking down a dark street where you've been beat up, and you remember. Boom, or you go to a family gathering and you see the person, or even at a distance, boom, or you smell something that reminds you of that event, boom, or you get a text from the person, or a nightmare. You're not broken, it's how your brain is designed. And then your midbrain demands resolution, and that could be a mask, that could be covering up like drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, to cover up the pain. Does this make sense? Is this explaining some things? Or you go to a well-meaning counselor and he or she suggests that you forgive the person. You need to choose to forgive. Boom, your SNS is very likely to ignite. And not only did you not forgive, you actually made it worse. Not your fault. In the forgiving path, we gently lead you through simple exercises, sophisticated, but simple, easy to access, designed to help remove a couple of those myelin layers from your brain burrito. Less triggering, less reactionary behavior, like I said, very sophisticated. This is beginning to make some sense. Can we begin to see why such an old adage like time heals all wounds, how shallow and frankly insensitive that is? Time doesn't heal a thing. And sometimes things get better, sometimes things get worse. Most of the time, we're just stuck. It's complicated. Hopefully some of this has begun to resonate with you. Bottom line, there is a neuroscientific reason why you have such difficulty letting go, forgiving. You likely have been fighting with your midbrain's self-protective mechanisms. It's not all your fault. You cannot just choose to forgive. So what can you do? Well, strategically, we need to learn how to fight power with an even greater power. The Forgiving Path. ForgivingPath.com is the only online biblical tool that I know of designed to help Christians, including Christian addicts, begin to forgive those deeply rooted abuses, hurts, and wounds that just might be re-triggering that addiction and harming your recovery, torpedoing it. Jesus commanded us to forgive 70 times, 7 times, but truth told, we're nowhere near that. We're not even close. This has been a source of shame for many addicts, probably you. So working through those deeply entrenched issues can be very frustrating and time-consuming. Addicts have found that self-medicating is so much easier, at least short-term. The Forgiving Path is simple, like I said. Over 1,000 Christians have been through it. They found noticeable relief, not perfect. That's heaven. It takes about 3 hours, under 3 hours. can be done on any smart device, and you'll get immediate results based upon 4 scientific forgiving metrics. There's a slight fee. It's a fraction of a cost of a counseling visit, and it's fully satisfaction guaranteed. If you go through it and you don't like it, we'll give you your money back. And again, it's really inexpensive. The Forgiving Path is designed to work in conjunction with any Christian addiction and forgiveness therapy. Here's a testimony from a lady who went through the path. I found this program immensely helpful at this time. I pray, though, that it will be a lasting relief for me. Often, I thought I forgave my ex of horrific things he put me and our daughter through. But then months or years later, the pain, anger, and frustration resurfaces for me. I can't seem to shake the painful memories I have. I feel physically chained to him, and I hate that. Even though my daughter is now safely protected from him and has been for 5 years now, I still fear him trying to kidnap her or harm her or try to get at her. We both struggle and have both spent time with Christian counselors. Never has forgiveness been explained like you explained it. The whole process you walk one through, you articulated how I felt all these years, how I felt invalidated, unheard, and as if I had to hand over the forgiveness without any recourse for the perpetrator. It felt so one-sided and wrong to me, like I was again being victimized by the justice system at hand. I believe God led me to your program, and I have hope that I will be free and healed. Wow. Here's another person. The Forgiving Path helped me to start releasing heavy burdens that were weighing my heart down and effective ways to work on healing and forgiving. It made me realize that God really does love me and does not want me to suffer. Being a survivor of much trauma and abuse, I was still holding on to a belief that I was being punished for something that I had done. I believed others deserved good, but I had a hard time believing that I too deserved good and was worthy. Here's one more. Throughout the first few stations, I found myself back at the age when the trauma happened, almost reliving those events and literally feeling that confusion, hurt, and anger as deeply as when it was happening. In that 12-year-old mind, I heard that I had deserved to have been treated fairly and with respect. That was new for me. I also recognized that I did not, nor do I now, owe him anything. I was given the opportunity to mourn the innocence that had been stolen from me. Wow. To realize that I was violated and had lost a very vital sense of security and worth, to weep over a past that can never be undone. Wow. So addict, are you ready? Just after this lesson, go to www.forgivingpath, one word, forgivingpath.com. Follow the simple instructions. Press on the Get Started Now button. It'll give you more instructions. You need to pick up some typical household items if you can. A mirror, candle, newspaper, bread, grape juice, a bowl of mud. You don't have to have those items, but they can help. You will be instructed to download 2 PDFs, legal documents, a letter from God. It's under 10 pages. You will want to have both of them with you as you go through the lessons. Here's one of the things that makes the Forgiving Path so sophisticated and helpful. When you press on the Do Entrance Survey Now button, you will be taken to a survey made up of 23 statements. For each statement, you've been through these. You'll be asked to determine how you feel about them. Do you strongly agree, feel neutral, disagree, strongly disagree? There is no right or wrong answer, just how you feel about the statement at that point in time. Don't get hung up anywhere. Just keep moving. And when you finish the 8 teaching video stations, the lessons, like I said, under 3 hours, you're going to retake that exact same survey, and we will immediately send you percent change numbers that the Holy Spirit caused to happen in your journey. And this is important. At the beginning, maybe even now, pray that the Spirit would bring a single incident to your mind that still causes you pain and sadness, fear, or hurt. A single incident that you can remember. You can remember how you felt, or what you did or didn't do, something that carries some substance and weight. And carry that incident with you through the surveys, through the stations, through the lessons, through the 3 hours. It doesn't have to be the worst thing that ever happened to you. Just let the Spirit bring something to mind. What we're doing is we're trying to rewire your brain how to process and deal with unresolved crimes and injustices. A single incident is needed. Don't change in the middle of the path. You can go through the path for as many incidents as you would want to. For 30 days, you become a member. We know one addict who went through the path 4 times in a single week for the very same incident, something her father did that caused her great hurt and harm when she was younger. All right? Look, you've got this. If you have any questions or get lost somehow, contact us at bill@gospel-app.com. We'll walk you through it. Please help us. Make sure you send us your feedback after you're done. We want to know what you felt and how it helped you. Your scores. Give us your scores. That would be great. Again, all confidential. Our goal is that your midbrain will experience less stress, less pain, have fewer unresolved injustices that will cause it to trigger a little or a lot. In the meantime, keep saying the Addict's Simple Uncluttered Gospel 2 or 3 times a day. Sit back, listen to it one more time before you head off to the forgiving path. Jesus follower addict, strictly because of what Jesus did for you 2,000 years ago, God actually loves you. He loves you with all of his heart, as much as the Father loves the Son and the Son loves the Father. He can't love you any more or any less than he does right now. He loves you as you are, not as you should be or could be. This is true whether you shake your addiction or not. You can't add to this love or take away from it. Now, I get it. It often feels like you've messed it up and need to do something so that God would like you better. Not so. How do you experience it more now? Simple. Good news. There is something that you can do and are invited to do. You can take daily baby steps to ask the Spirit inside of you to make you know, experience, and feel just how much God loves you right now. Addict, just ask. Ask again later today. Ask tomorrow. Make it a spiritual habit. So, are you beginning to notice changes? Could be little ones. Are you feeling less stressed? Are you feeling a little more loved by God as you are, the addict? Are you feeling a little more hopeful? Are you seeking to self-medicate a little less often? Are the drugs, alcohol, porn, sex, gambling giving you less hits? Are you smiling more? Let us know. bill@gospel-app.com. One last bit of encouragement from the Bible. Israel, the idol addict, right, that was their drug of choice, had returned from exile to the land of promise and wondered in their brains if God had still abandoned them. I mean, his glory, his presence wasn't even in the rebuilt temple. They were still occupied by foreign powers. They were really people of great shame. Then the prophet Zephaniah gave a word from God, so hopeful, so encouraging. They were still stuck in the wake of their bad, addictive choices, but now they had something to hang on as they moved forward. Here's what the prophet said to them and to you today, Christian addict. The Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save. He takes great delight in you. He quiets you with his love. He rejoices over you with singing. So others may not treat you this way. You may not treat you this way, but God does. Take heart, child of God.